We're going to move into session 2 now with collaborative efforts. And to kick that session off is Troy Fieseler with Wyoming Game and Fish Department.
All right, is everybody seeing my screen there? All right, so my name's Troy Fieseler. I'm a habitat biologist with the Game and Fish Department based in Pinedale, and I was asked to give a brief background of the Upper Green Fence Initiative and then go into a little bit of detail on how we prioritize projects within the region. All right, there we go. I'll start that conservation partners in Sublette County have a pretty rich history of coming together and collaborating to really achieve these landscape level outcomes to benefit wildlife and natural resources and across all land ownership boundaries. And one of the most important driving factors behind this, if not the most important, is that it's just built with very dedicated and passionate individuals that at the end of the day check their ego at the door to just get some good things done on the ground. So known as the Upper Green Fence Initiative, this is another example of one of those efforts. It really leverages each partner's unique abilities or resources, their capacities to improve these problematic fences in strategic locations. So what we do, we various partners, they'll share that local knowledge and expertise on the ground. Others step in to help with grant writing and fundraising, while others provide the field staff and labor to actually do some of the work on the ground. It's made up of several different work units, if you will, that collectively come together to make things happen. And I would say one of the most interesting things about this initiative, we don't really truly have an organizational structure. We're not a standalone nonprofit or anything like that, but it is just made up of these various champions within these different agencies and groups that over time have worked together to make this possible. And I would say that designing fences for wildlife, we all know that's nothing new. It has taken place for much longer than I've been a part of it, for decades longer, in fact. And there could be quite a few other people this morning talking to you about this effort. But if I could sum up what we are trying to do, it is to implement these fence projects at a landscape level. And I believe the initiative has been instrumental at achieving this, has been widely successful. And again, crediting that to a lot of the folks that did this before us and that are continuing to do it today. And I would just like to touch on that comment about landowners and their interest in these wildlife friendly fences. That is one of the cornerstones of this project or this initiative. Any given day, we have 30 to 50 landowners on our wait list. It's at a point now it's snowballed so much, there's so much interest, they are calling us to see about getting wildlife friendly fencing instead of us having to call them. So it is definitely possible. Before jumping into our prioritization process, we did want to share some exciting news, and that's the hiring of a fence program manager. This position is housed in the Game and Fish Department here in Pinedale. We hired Devin Gerhardt. He's on a call this morning, and he will be working to increase efforts not only in the Red Desert, but also taking a pretty big weight off my shoulders here in the Green River region. And taking on some of the projects I've been associated with over the years within this program here. And of course, this wouldn't have been made possible without the generous support of the Knobloch Family Foundation, the Wildlife Fund, and grants administered through WAFLA. So the development of our prioritization and ranking tool was really a result of this massive increase in requests, again, mainly from landowners and permittees. In the years leading up to 2020, the NRCS, the Conservation District, the Game and Fish, we were all seeing this request come in. And we just needed a better way to take the limited money that we had, although it was quite a bit of money, still limited in regards to the number of requests, to put it on the ground in the areas of most impact that we'd have the biggest bang or return on our investment. So a combination of ecological and fence condition scores were developed. Big game crucial ranges and migratory habitat. That migratory habitat using both the raw collar data, also identified and designated corridors. That goes into developing the wildlife value score. And then the type of fence, so woven wire versus barbed wire, the number of wires, the wire spacings, That goes into the fence condition score. Those are weighted. So for example, a woven wire fence obviously is weighted much higher than the other types of fences out there. Finally, we do assign bonus points. These bonus points are for projects that incorporate removals, trying to incentivize eliminating fences on the landscape. We give bonus points to areas that we have prioritized as a group, as a region within the county here. And then also if a landowner or permittee can provide some kind of cash contribution or in-kind value, bonus points would be assigned to that as well. And just for reference, wildlife values make up around 3/5 of the total score. That's by design to put the emphasis on the animals. So this ranking process has been extremely valuable, especially when it comes to getting money and writing those grants and project funding. But it's not the only thing we use. There's a ton of other data out there that we utilize. The first is utilizing the collar data. As I mentioned, this does go into the ranking system, but when we are able to, we try to dig deeper where we can. This image here is just an example of that. So the blue lines represent fences that have been updated. And then the collar data we use to hone in on those more areas of concentrated use. In this example, those are where we place crossing structures to help even alleviate even more of that barrier with the fences we're posing. And then secondly, the prioritization fence tool. I believe this will be discussed later today, so I don't want to pay too much attention to it or steal anybody's thunder. But we have used this, a tool developed by some partners at UW, to identify some of the most troublesome fences out there. So again, our ranking tool highlighted these fences ranked high to work on. Then we use the prioritizing fence tool to highlight the areas that, in this instance, deer are struggling the most with. It's a very important data. It was used to kind of make that pitch to the landowner in order to get this fence removed. And that's all I had. I know that was pretty quick and short, but I'd just like to say thank you. As mentioned earlier, there have been a ton of people working on this effort for many, many, many years, even before I was on board, to make all this possible. Other agencies, NGOs, and of course, a whole list of funding partners and supporters down there as well. So with that, I can take any questions.
Thanks, Troy, for keeping us on time. Got a minute for a question. There is one in the chat box. Troy, would you be willing to share your score sheet so we can adapt and use it within other fence initiatives?
Yes, absolutely. That's no problem. And yeah, I guess get that email there. You can send me the contact, or at the end of this whole thing, maybe anybody that's interested can let Andrew know and get that list to me.
Be happy to facilitate that. Jared, one more question.
Sorry, you're just gonna have to deal with me asking questions.
Oh,
Troy,
it's good.
in your conversations, like when you guys are sitting there with that score sheet, does anybody ever talk about, like, you'll see this in my talk too, but like what are the other fences around that spot? You guys ever kind of talk about the local area? Like, is this one fence and there's no other fences and 10 miles on either side, or is this like a fence that's in a cluster of bad fences or a cluster of good fences? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we definitely have those conversations, for sure. The ranking tool or the others, they're not perfect. They're good as the data that we feed into them. So when we get together as a group and say, hey, this one scored low or this one scored high, or we have other ones saying this is a bad fence, we end up always having projects that we move forward with or don't move forward with as a result of those discussions. So it definitely comes into play.
Food for Potter. Appreciate you, Troy. We're going to move on. Next up is Melanie Purcell. She's with Sublette County Conservation District. Take it away, Melanie.
Hi, thank you. Make sure I got the. Can you guys see my screen? Or, oh, okay, hold on, got it. Okay, can you see that?
Sure can.
So I'm Melanie Purcell with Sublette County Conservation District. I'm part of the Upper Green Fence Initiative, and I'm just going to touch a little bit on sort of the field fence inventory and field certification stuff that we do. As a partnership, we kind of discovered initially that we all needed certain things to help verify our own fence projects, and so we came together and developed a list of attributes that we all wanted to kind of make sure that we collected in the field so that we could help each other across projects like we often do. Troy had mentioned fence type and condition. I'm just going to touch on some of the key attributes. I'm not going to go into basics of like name, agency, date, that kind of thing, but fence condition is important. That goes into our prioritization tool. What type of fence is it? What are the number of wires that it currently has? What's the fence post material? And, is one preferred over another in that location? For whatever reason would a wood fence make the fence more visible to wildlife? Would steel posts be preferred because it's a real wet area? Things like that. And then, of course, we take the wire height, so we always measure from the ground up, and we always measure at a line post or at a brace as sort of a control, because that's really the only place that you can control for height on your fence line. And then we also document fence condition. Kind of tells us the integrity of the fence. If it's in poor condition, often that's going to tell us that that fence needs a total replacement. And if it's in good condition, we can often use the materials and maybe just modify that fence by changing out the bottom wire and readjusting the spacing. And since some of those attributes are a little bit arbitrary, we did also develop a list of descriptions for people to reference. And then some of the other key things that we like to document are wildlife signs. So while we're out there traversing the fence, are there any noticeable wildlife crossings that we see? It might be a good place for a gate or some kind of crossing structure. Do you see hair, blood, feathers along the fence line? Do you come across an entanglement or a bird strike? And then, of course, discussions with landowners and land managers can also help identify high use or problem areas. This picture of the antelope there is actually a pre-modification where a landowner told us he was having problems with his fence, and we put a camera up, and the antelope is actually fighting the bottom wire because his horns got stuck in it until he was able to free himself. And a few other things that we document are just more important for helping determine cost and labor intensity of the fence. Are there any water features or other structures that going to have to figure out how to get around? Is it a river or is there a big boulder in the way? What is there dense vegetation, an aspen stand or a lot of willows or a large brush that's obscuring the fence line? What's the site access? Is it going to be easy or difficult to get equipment and materials in there? And then brace type can be important. If the fence needs extra support, double braces might be necessary in areas, things like that. And then, of course, we take a lot of photos. So then after a fence is completed and the conversion is taken place, we go out and we certify that fence to ensure that it meets specifications. So when we put a project together, there's a fence package that identifies, everything for that project and what it needs for each type of fence identified. So within that are material specifications, those minimum standards that are outlined for to ensure life of a fence into the future. And that includes things like wire gauge and certification type, what are the types of posts and braces needed, and what are those wood treatment requirements, length of braces, diameters of posts, and things like that. And we also obviously check for, the wildlife friendly specifications. And again, we always measure from the ground up at a post or a brace. And this, typically, the type of fence we put depends on many factors, the type of wildlife, that are using that area, the spacing or or type of livestock, excuse me, the terrain and things like that. So the primary attributes that I would say for data collection to ensure that those specifications are met are the wire type, the heights, and the spacing. So typically in Subic County, we see 4-wire wildlife friendly fence or pole top fence. And, with those specifications, the important thing is, the smooth bottom wire, 18 inches from the ground, preferably top wire height at 40 inches, although I know some are trying to move that to 38. Pole top, want to make sure that the top of that pole doesn't exceed 42 inches. And then the spacing between the wires and the pole are important. So for example, the 4-wire fence, we're going to look at that we have that 12-inch spacing between the 3rd wire and the 4th wire. And then for the pole top fence, we're going to look for that spacing between the top wire and the bottom of that pole. And then of course, again, we take photos to document that. And finally, a few things that we document are for, integrity or safety or neighborly elements. Brace spacing needs to be every 1/4 mile. And, that helps ensure the integrity of the fence. We want to make sure that the posts are secure and wires are tight. And we check to make sure that materials have been cleaned up and properly disposed of. We've actually not been able to certify fences until materials are cleaned up for various reasons. Either a neighbor complained or just safety issues of being out there for both people and wildlife. And then, of course, if there's other things that were identified in that project, have those been done? Like if metal posts were used in a wet area, have those been capped so that animals can't get trapped in them? And then if it's a bird strike area or near a lek and markers were determined to be placed on that fence, were they installed correctly? So really those are some of the main things. I don't know, I may have missed a couple things, but that's really the basics of it. So thank you. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
Thanks, Melanie. We got time for a question. Kristen?
Yeah, who do you have taking all of these inventory data?
Well, we've kind of, all the partners do. It kind of depends. The Conservation District for a while had secured a grant that allowed us to be able to help with inventory and certification. And so the Conservation District was doing quite a bit of that for probably about 3 or 4 years. And but really Game and Fish, NRCS, Conservation District, we all kind of help with that. So
Awesome, thanks.
So much. Everyone's doing great, staying on track. Appreciate that. We'll move on. Next, we have Kimi Zamuda. She's with the Nature Conservancy and the Absaroka Fence Initiative. Take it away, Kimi.
Thank you. Let me just confirming you guys can see the screen and not the notes.
You're good.
Okay, great. Thanks. Hi, everyone. Yeah, as Andrew said, I'm Kimi Zamuda. I work for the Nature Conservancy in our Wyoming migration program. I'm also the co-chair of the Absaroka Fence Initiative, or AFI, and I'm going to talk a little bit about AFI and our collaborative fence work in Park County. So who is AFI? I feel like most people know about the Upper Green. We're a little different and definitely a little newer. So the Absaroka Fence Initiative was founded about 5 years ago, and it's a community-driven initiative bringing together a broad partnership of government agencies, landowners, NGOs, and researchers. All of our groups are listed on the screen, not including our private landowners and ranch managers that are part of us. We also partner with several groups around research and fence inventory. These include the Beyond Yellowstone Living Lab, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, and researchers from University of Wyoming. And I'll note, like Troy did, that AFI is just a collaborative effort, and so the Wildlife Fund acts as our fiscal sponsor, which we are greatly appreciative of. So this partnership really leverages our expertise and resources towards the shared goal of making fences functional for livestock management and wildlife movement across the landscape. We do this through public work days, contracted projects, and education and outreach. And just really briefly, kind of how we function. So, AFI is comprised of three committees. We have the steering committee, which basically organizes and executes AFI's fence work. So, we get funding, complete project selection and implementation, and coordinate outreach and education. And then our technical committee kind of scientifically informs project prioritization. They coordinate and inform fence inventories and compiles wildlife data and up-to-date fence recommendations. And then our comms committee, as the name implies, basically maintains and coordinates our external communications. So to date, again, we're about 5 years old. We've completed 25 projects, removing 17.75 miles of fence and modifying 28.9 miles. For all these projects, AFI utilizes, like all defense initiatives, I think, wildlife data and geospatial analysis to really inform project decision making and implementation. So our technical committee has gone through multiple prioritization meetings over the years, looking at specific wildlife, high and medium use areas, and fence inventory data. Recently, as Troy and later I think Jared's group is going to talk about, we've utilized a fence prioritization tool that the Merkel Research Group created to aid with fence project selection. And like Troy discussed for the Upper Green, we also have a project ranking sheet that weighs ecological impacts, such as whether a fence is in crucial range, current fence condition, and then the type of project, whether it's a removal or a mod. For our projects, we do work both on public and private lands, though more of our projects have occurred on public lands for a couple of reasons. One of these, just to kind of show our thinking, is that public lands provides that layer of certainty that wildlife-friendly fence design and construction will be guaranteed to remain at that standard for the fence's lifespan. Another factor is just, we have federal agencies as some of our main partners. So for the projects to date, we have heavily utilized volunteer support. Kind of how we're thinking about this is AFI provides the community with an opportunity to participate in improving our landscape while greatly reducing our costs for completing projects. We also have some incredible volunteers here in the Cody area. So we've had about 500 volunteers out at our projects with over 3,000 hours of volunteer time donated. On average, we have about 30 folks at each of our public projects that we host, and we've had a couple of fence events with over 80 plus volunteers. For the past 2 years, we've also done annual fence modifications with the local high school. So they come out for about half a day. We talk about wildlife and migration and the impacts of fencing, as well as natural resource and wildlife professions and jobs in this field, and we modify a fence. So for the projects without volunteers, we have worked with the U.S. Forest Service grazing permittees as well as private landowners, where AFI will buy the materials for the fence, and then the permittee or private landowner provides the labor to replace the fences to the agreed upon wildlife-friendly fence specs. And some of those fence specs have included laydown sections, extra gates, the standard bottom wire 18 inches. We pretty much always go with a 38-inch top wire or top rail height, especially in elk and mule deer areas. And then we've also contracted a couple of times with the conservation district for them to modify fences. So how do we fund this work? Aside from volunteer time and effort, which we've estimated to be about $97,000 to date, we funded our work primarily through grants as well as the Game and Fish Commission license. For a couple of AFI projects on BLM land, BLM will purchase the fence materials, and AFI volunteers will be the ones going out and kind of doing the labor and rebuilding the fence. And then we have also utilized the Wyoming Conservation Corps for 2 summers, paying for about 10 days of fence work each time. So that's kind of where we've been and where are we headed. So AFI and our incredible volunteers have accomplished a lot in these past 5 years, and I think as we all recognize, there's a lot more to do and a faster pace of work is needed. Going forward, AFI is planning more landscape level projects to have the most impact. We're focusing on funding more contracted fence work and supplementing these with some community volunteer days. And so to do this, we've begun our Carter Mountain Pronghorn Fence Project. So this is a multi-phase project to improve the habitat connectivity and wildlife movement across the Carter Mountain Pronghorn migration route, which for those that haven't heard me talk about it a million times, it's about a 60-mile route from Carter Mountain into the Bighorn Basin. And we aim to do this through strategically modifying and where possible, removing about 100 to 120 miles of fence. So in 2024, fence crews inventoried 40 miles of priority fences in this project area, and AFI modified 4 miles. This fence inventory will continue this summer, and then once we secure funding, AFI will contract out replacing the first 20 miles of priority BLM fences, hopefully starting this summer and fall. So I'm really excited about this project and all the work that AFI has upcoming. And with that, this is my contact information and AFI's website and Facebook page. So thank you really to everyone in AFI. It's definitely a collaborative effort, and to all of our funders. Happy to take any questions.
Kimi, you've got a question there in the chat, and a comment.
Okay.
Impressive volunteer numbers and love the high school work days. Do you consider sage grouse in your project ranking or in your fence modifications, markers, wooden posts, etc.?
Yeah. So I think in our main, sage grouse are considered. It's not actually in our ranking sheet, if I recall correctly. That being said, this Carter Mountain project we are talking about is we do plan to put out markers because that is in main sage grouse area. And a lot of our work, while it isn't in the project ranking sheet, has considered sage grouse.
I have a question for you, Kimi. You mentioned that you have tons of pounds of recyclable material. How difficult is that for you to get that off the landscape, and where's the closest recycling center?
So we do have a local recycling center, so that is the easy part. Typically, I think it depends on the project. So if we're working out on kind of our local BLM YU bench area, we basically bring a lot of trucks. BLM in that part does a lot for us in basically having trailers and pulling it out. AFI, which I don't have a picture of, we actually have our own trailer with kind of our logo for both advertising and putting in wire and that. So it does kind of depend. For the most part, it's just machinery and trailers to pull it. For some of our backcountry stuff, I know once, if not twice, we've worked with backcountry horsemen to help get some of that material out.
There any chance you make a little bit of money off of it? AFI gets some proceeds back?
Yep, we do. Not it fluctuates on the cost, but we do. It's kind of our like petty cash is that it will go into that fund, and often goes towards like we have hats, which I have right here. We have little hats for folks who come to our volunteer days and stickers, and that money usually goes to those funds.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions, so we're gonna move on. Thanks, Kimi. Next up, we have Amy Anderson, and she's with Wyoming Game and Fish Department. All you, Amy.
So I just wanted to talk for just a minute about the Red Desert Fence Initiative. It is absolutely in its infancy. We don't have any fancy hats or anything like that to start with. This has been a problem in the Red Desert for decades. It's not a new problem. We've known for many decades that this was happening in the Red Desert. The fences were a problem to pronghorn. People like Greg Hyatt, our previous wildlife biologist, and Mary Reed with the BLM have been converting fences as they could for many, many years. But it takes a research effort like Hall Sawyer's project, and a captivating map like this one that really helps visualize where the problems are, and it can really kick management into overdrive. This map landed on my desk in the winter of 23-24, not long after that really bad winter that we had. And I was told to get to work on this project. And so I started looking at land ownership in the checkerboard. This is all checkerboard. And as you know, the difficulties working in checkerboard. I managed to find one project where all the land ownership was one person. And so I decided to start with that one. I approached that landowner. It happened to be NL Land and Livestock, and he was all in from the get-go. And that was this piece to the west side of the map. Hopefully you can all still see that. The 16 square mile piece that Hall Sawyer talked about earlier. And the landowner also mentioned that the southern 16 square miles was the same fence, and if we could include that in the project as well. When we did the initial inventory, we found that it was woven wire with 2 strands of barbed wire on the top and a strand of barbed wire on the bottom, and was a really bad fence. And Hall's study got in the hands of a lot of really cool people who were excited to be part of the project. And this thing fell into place faster than I've ever seen a project fall into place before. We had the Wildlife Fund approach us. They wanted to manage the project. They hooked us up with the Knobloch family, who immediately jumped on board. We got partnerships with the Little Snake River Conservation District. The BLM offered to help. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Partners Program came on board immediately. And then we were able to get funding from WWNRT, the Game and Fish Trust, Muley Fanatics, Governor's Big Game License Coalition. And we were able to convert in one season 24 miles of fence, effectively opening up 18,000 acres to pronghorn that they were excluded from previously. We converted from that terrible woven wire to a 4-strand barbed wire fence. The landowner fabricated drill stem pipe crossing structures that he substituted for traditional H braces, and he installed those every quarter mile along the fence. And so we went from 24 miles of woven wire to that looked like this. Hopefully you can see that. Lots of vegetation growing in the fence, a lot of sand dunes up against the fence. We had found places where wildlife were excavating under the fence. We think in that lower 16 sections, they had actually pushed the wire off of the posts and were able to go under in some places. But
hey, Amy, we're not seeing your slides moving.
Okay.
We're just seeing
Okay.
like the first slide for some reason.
Okay. Let me try again. I'm going to stop sharing and try again.
Sorry to stop you, but it seemed like
No,
those
that's
pictures
okay.
are going to be so important to what you're saying.
So on your other screen, click that.
You could switch display to the other screen if you have 2 monitors in front of you.
I do.
There you go.
Yay,
Great.
we can see it.
Okay. Now you see
Yay.
that's the old fence, the one that we removed, and we converted to this fence. That crossing structure is 4 rails. The 2 middle rails are fixed. The bottom and top rails are removable. The landowner did remove those this winter. I am very curious to hear Dale talk about all of his crossing structure work. Pat Rogers has had trail cameras on these fences all winter long. And the initial videos show that pronghorn are just, they do not like these crossing structures. We hope that they'll get used to them over time. Elk, they adapted to them right away. They love them. But the pronghorn, look at those crossing structures and then immediately go next door to the wire and cross under the wire. So so this next picture, this is what the crossing structures look like when the top and bottom rails are removed. So hopefully the pronghorn will get used to that. As Troy mentioned, we are super excited to have a fence coordinator on board. The Red Desert Fence Initiative area butts right up against that Upper Green River Fence Initiative. So Devin will have his work cut out for him. This is an enormous area of the state. He has already started making contacts with landowners down there in that big 100,000 acre block that Hall identified. We have phase 2 identified. You can see on this map the kind of purple and green speck right up there in the northern corner of the Red Desert Fence Initiative area. That will be phase 2. And that one's a bit more complicated. We're working with elk, moose, mule deer, tons and tons of sage grouse. And so that one's got a lot more wildlife that are interacting with that fence. But we hope to move down into that southern portion that Hall identified and start converting some of those problematic fences in the future. And Devin Gerhardt, our fence coordinator, is going to be really helpful in getting all of those fences inventoried. You can see it's a massive area. And I'm excited about this fence summit because you're giving us all kinds of good ideas and strategies to carry this project forward. So I guess I don't have any more information than that. If people have questions for me, I am happy to answer them.
So much, Amy. Really appreciate it. You got time for a question from Troy.
Hey, man, a quick question. This might be also a question for Hall too, but do you still have collared pronghorn in that area? I just think it's a great opportunity for a before and after look into that.
That is a Hall question. I believe there are not collars out there right now.
Yeah, Troy, there aren't, but I believe Jared is on here, and I think Jared's gearing up to maybe follow up with that. Jared, you want to hop in?
Yeah, under kind of the NRCS side, we were looking for great situation where we have fixed fence and we could do it before and after, exactly what you said, Troy. And I kind of identified this and told Hall about it. And yeah, we have collars that are just about to be purchased right now. And we're just starting the conversation. Amy, this is probably the first time you're hearing about it, but we're just starting the conversation to think about how to put them out to get like a before and after part of this study. So yeah, it's in the works.
I think that would be great because this research really did drive this project into creation and opened a lot of people's eyes. And Devin, when he approaches these landowners, the very first thing he does is hand them that captivating map, that visual that just tells the story. And this is 40 animals. And we know this is a huge area with problems throughout. So yeah, if we could find more captivating maps just like this one, it really helps tell the story.
So much, everyone. Kimi, Thad, Bill, you're going to have to wait. We're going to stay on schedule. Again, thank you, Amy. Next up, and closing out the session is Renee Seidler. She's with the Jackson Hole Wildlife Foundation. It's all you, Renee.
Thanks, Andrew. Am I sharing my screen and am I in the presenter mode? No, hang on. There we go. Does that look right to everybody?
Great.
Great. Awesome. Thanks, Andrew. Renee Seidler, Executive Director of the Jackson Hole Wildlife Foundation. I'm going to talk about our wildlife-friendly fence program, which has been around for 29 years, impressively. So just to orient you, not everybody, I'm sure, on this summit knows who we are at the Jackson Hole Wildlife Foundation. We have, sorry, I got to move my little screen. Hang on one sec so I can see my notes. We have 4 main programs at the Wildlife Foundation. Give Wildlife a Break, which is kind of a road ecology program. Habitat, which actually our wildlife-friendly fence now project fits under the Habitat program. Nature Mapping Jackson Hole, which is a community science program. And Bearwise Jackson Hole, which is a collaborative program with several of the agencies in the Jackson Hole area. The Jackson Hole Wildlife Foundation was established in 1993, so we're in our 32nd year. We started with our Give Wildlife a Break program, and most of our history we've been volunteers. So we were started by concerned citizens who then began volunteering and created a nonprofit in 93. Our fence program was birthed in 1996. And though our name suggests a Jackson Hole focus, just like wildlife, we don't recognize the human boundaries and borders. So our work reaches beyond Jackson Hole just to support wildlife movement and habitat across the broader landscape. So our fence program is, sorry, I don't have notes here. The volunteers are really at the heart of our fence program, in addition to our community science program. We work obviously with our land-owning partners, but that includes both private and public land. So we're working across all of those land types. And just to speak to sort of our lack of boundaries, the locations we've done our fence projects are very much sort of Western Wyoming, Eastern Idaho, and we utilize several different best practices to guide our work and help us prioritize our work on fence removal and modification. So, of course, the Wyoming Handbook to Fences and Wildlife, Wyoming Game and Fish's wildlife-friendly fence standards, regulations that may be set in code in the counties, and of course, peer-reviewed literature and our partners and private landowner good knowledge. As we all do, we really want to ensure that we are hitting the goal of doing conservation work. 2 studies of several, but 2 of the main studies we really lean on to talk about the benefits of the work we're doing are all the way back from 2006. Harrington and Conover, probably most everybody on this summit knows that publication. I would love to hear if there's other publications that other folks use to talk about the benefits of removing or modifying fences. And then also some good work that our partner from the BLM, Del Woolwine, has done in the Upper Green and looking at sage grouse fence strikes. A pretty remarkable number of fences of sage grouse collide with fences, at least in that ecosystem. Alarming number of animals are lost. The elements of our fence program, just at a high level, partnerships with our agency partners and private landowners. We do prioritize our projects, not very differently, I think, than many of you and a couple of the presentations that we've just seen. Consulting with agencies and the private landowners, looking at wildlife movements, whether that's big game ranges defined by Game and Fish or radio collar data, or just local knowledge, fence type, fence extent, the upkeep and maintenance of the fence. And we're starting to look a bit at the fence prioritization tool that the Merkle Lab has created. We think that that will help feed into our work really well. We recently hired Cody Pitts as our habitat program manager. So he is running our fence program, and Cody has really taken the initiative to formalize our prioritization work so that it's really down on paper and can hold us more accountable for how, because we too have a number of projects that we just kind of delay from year to year because we can't get to all the projects that we would like to in every year. So this is really the slide that I wanted to convey to you. I think that people may be really interested, maybe some of the newer folks who are trying to work with volunteers and fence removals and stuff. So yeah, we've been doing this for almost 3 decades with volunteers. In fact, our fence removal program started solely as volunteers. The Wildlife Foundation had no staff for a very long time. Most of its history is either no staff or 1 full-time staff and some part-time staff. We're now 5 full-time staff and some seasonal workers for bird banding. And so we've transitioned to a little more leadership with our fence program coming internally from staff. But most of our time as a fence removal program has been run by lead volunteers. And so those folks have been incredibly helpful for us, not only just conducting the work, but creating the program, trialing, testing out different ways to make things work as best as we can. And now those folks, I almost call them sort of retired from their leadership role. They're still volunteers on our fence projects, and what the role that they really play well is championing the work and helping us recruit new volunteers and teaching those new volunteers. So it's really, our organization in general relies heavily on volunteers and our fence program especially. So recruiting, retaining, and advertising, we use social media, we use our e-news, and then we have a large list of fence volunteers. So we do very specific emails and invites to those folks. We send up follow-up emails after projects. We recognize the projects and the volunteers in our annual report. We have a protocol that's very well defined that we use in the field on the day of. That includes an SOP, a safety presentation or safety talk at every fence project. Typically, we have a guest speaker. We provide all the tools. And then after the fact, we really like to celebrate the work that's been done, which is really helpful in retaining our volunteers. We'll have an annual potluck that thanks our volunteers, sometimes handwritten thank you cards. We acknowledge our volunteers throughout the year in various ways. We celebrated our 25th anniversary in a big way with volunteers. So that is really important to recognize and retain your volunteers. Statistics, sort of results. So over our history, we have removed or improved 268 miles of fence. That's relative to kind of similar to driving from Green River to Cheyenne, just to give you a reference. We also have 13 miles of drop fence in the Upper Green that we work with the BLM on, raising and lowering those fences seasonally. We're going to go convert some more miles this year, so we'll have more drop fence down there starting soon. Over the years, we have conducted 165 projects and of all fence types. Each fence project is typically 20 to 30, thanks Andrew, I see that, volunteers. We have an average of 265 volunteers per year. Through the program life, we've had about 2,500 volunteers. Now we count a volunteer as a person each project, so that may be some repeat volunteers that are coming project after project. Over 500 volunteers, regular-ish volunteers on our mailing list. 11,700 volunteer hours over 29 years. And if you take the independent sector value for an hour's worth of work for a volunteer, that's in 2024, that equates to over $23,000 of donated effort. And then, of course, reflecting back to those publications I showed in terms of conservation, this is really important in getting back to your stakeholders, both your volunteers, your donors, et cetera, is really explaining the importance of the problem, fixing it, and what the benefits are. So saving over 100 ungulates based in numbers from those publications and over 300 sage grouse, and of course, other species. Thanks to our partners. Hopefully I have a minute for questions, and thanks so much for your attention and time.
Thanks so much, Renee. Really appreciated your presentation. And let's go ahead and have one question by Troy in the chat. for Renee or anyone else in that matter, but has an adopt a fence type of program been discussed using volunteers or local businesses to remove fences and or pick up let down seasonally?
Yeah, absolutely, Troy. We haven't done a lot of that in Teton County, Wyoming. We've been working on that in Sublette County, and we've kind of had some hit or miss for various reasons. But we have Winter Range Foundation, which is a nonprofit in the Upper Green, actually regularly raises and lowers a couple of those fences that I mentioned. And so we just kind of help to guide that and keep them on track, but they really run their own program there. Backcountry hunters and anglers did do work for a number of years with us, but they were actually coming from Jackson and driving down to the Upper Green. So we would like to do more of that recruitment and having more of like a corporate or group adoption of a fence, especially on raise and lower programs. We think that'd be fantastic. So if you want to send anybody in our direction, that would be great. Thanks for the question, Troy.